search has changed a lot. And the idea that you would go online and just search and your company is going to come up is changing because the conversation is taking place on ChatGPT or Perplexity. That's changing the whole way we have to think about the customer buying journey, which means you have to be a lot more customer-centric.
Even in the 70s, if you wanted to buy a car, you had to go talk to the person in the showroom to look at the car, to get information about the car because it wasn't available anywhere else. Now you don't have to leave. You can stay in your pajamas and buy a car with your phone.
You have to be customer-centric because the customer is in the driver's seat.
I think sales is effectively helping people, right?
Yes.
And what that looks like is different in the scenario. Amazon helps people, but it's all transactional, right? It's not people.
Most people today have a lot of data. What are the questions that you need to answer about your customers that you can get in the data?
Welcome to Sales and Cigars, the sales podcast where the only smoke we blow is cigar smoke. Today, my guest is Laura Patterson. She's got this marketing company that's a little different than what you might be used to. It's Vision Edge Marketing. And they don't do the websites, they don't do the SEO, they don't do the pay-per-click, and they don't do the copywriting. They focus on the strategy. They focus on making sure that you're able to go out and communicate and message to your audience, and you know who your audience is, and you know what they care about. She drops a ton of little golden nuggets. We got some show notes for how to get a hold of her. There's a free resource in there. So go check this out. Pay attention to what she's saying because she talks a lot about her grandfather. And what the cool thing is that she's sort of become her grandfather in the sense that what he was teaching is now she's teaching because she's got that expertise and that understanding. So it's a fun episode, great conversation. Go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Laura, welcome to Sales and Cigars. I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to join us today.
Thank you for having me, Walter. I'm really excited to be here.
So what I like to do is get our guests to start off and share a little bit about what it is that got them to be an entrepreneur and, you're a little bit about your journey. So can you take us back a little bit?
I will be happy to do so. I want to be really honest. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. So I just want to put that out there. And I bet there's some people in your community that never intended to be an entrepreneur either. Saying that, though, I actually was an entrepreneur quite early, in an earlier part of my life. I grew up in the Midwest, and I was one of those, young kids that needed to make money. I didn't have anyone handing money out. I didn't get an allowance. And so to make money, I shoveled snow, raked leaves, pulled weeds, do whatever I could. And along the way, I also sold the world's finest chocolate. I'm sure there's some people in your community are probably familiar with that, knocking door to door to sell chocolate as a way to make money. And I learned kind of early on that if I wanted to make money, which was business value, I needed to be able to create customer value. So this idea of customer value became kind of important. And then maybe some of the members of your community, maybe even you, Walter, remember this organization. It's still around today, but it's been reincarnated, called Junior Achievement. And I got an opportunity to be in Junior Achievement. And for those of you who might not know what it was like way back when, entrepreneurs, business people, would work with students, usually after school, and we would make a business. And there would be a group of students and we would have businesses and we would compete with each other and we would have to figure out a customer problem, make a product, an actual real thing, manufacture that product, figure out how to market that product and sell that product. And so that was really exposure to being an entrepreneur. And I kind of realized I liked business, but I wasn't sure I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so when my opportunity came to go forth into the world to make a living, I went to work for others. And I learned a lot by working for others. I've had amazing mentors who were entrepreneurs, and I really learned so much. Maybe we can talk about that another time. But along came 1999. And if you were in Austin, Texas in 1999, and you could spell marketing, you could get a job. And I had been in Austin since 1982. I actually came here. I was working for a startup that had an application software for the medical industry that ran on a Wang 2200. I just dated myself, I know. And because I was traveling a lot, marketing and selling this product, I ran into some folks here in Austin, Texas, that was working for another startup, which was a little startup part of Motorola Semiconductor. And I was footloose and fancy free. They invited me to Austin, and I came to Austin in 1982. And that was a very different Austin in 1982. So now it's 1999. I'm pretty well established in Austin, and my phone is ringing along with many others. And in answer to your question, a colleague says to me, "Is your phone ringing like my phone is ringing?" And I said, yes. And I was working for another startup company that had an enterprise software application. And Barry said to me, "Maybe this would be a good time to start a company." And so we jumped from the frying pan to the fire, the proverbial story, and we started Vision Edge Marketing. And our first customers were the people who were trying to hire us. And I'm so grateful to those companies. Many of them did not make it through the dot-com bust. So that's a whole nother story about being an entrepreneur and going through the business cycles of the ups and downs that you have to weather. And it's a different thing when it's your company and you have to weather that and you have people depending on you than when you're an employee for a company. So that's how I became an entrepreneur.
Well, I mean, that's a great story. I appreciate you sharing, because Austin still today, there's a lot of startups and companies that are growing. There's still a lot of software. There's still a lot of smart people there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just gotten bigger.
Yeah. Every trend that happens, Austin's got a whole, cottage industry around it, whether it's e-commerce. We have BigCommerce here, which was started here and evolved into a large company. And now we're in the AI world, right? So we have a whole cluster of companies in the AI, and I'm sure one of those will emerge. And don't forget NVIDIA. So, right?
Well, yeah, you just all of the tech stuff that found its way out of California. Some of it has found its way to Austin because of the
yes, this is true.
Climate and weather, I suppose. But so the idea that we fall into entrepreneurship, or that it's not something we planned, but it becomes a byproduct of us learning how to do things along the way, right? In your case, it's marketing, understanding industry, finding a niche, and really taking that, and just, you didn't have the itch, but it was just that one question to kind of like, maybe we should do this, and then you were willing to just go jump in. Some people have the itch that they want to just go work for themselves. I think there needs to be a balance there, right? Like when you started, you had clients, you were building it, your phone was ringing. That it was a great spot. But when the dot-com bust came, how did you weather that? Because when you got companies struggling, we struggle as, providers and vendors.
It's a great question. So life was really good in 1999 and pretty good in 2000, but the world went upside down in 2001. We had 9/11. We had a dot-com bust, and Barry's wife got a very aggressive form of breast cancer. And I ended up, Barry came to me and said, I got to go do something different now that Rosemary has breast cancer, and I'm going to need to bow out. And of course, we had all the paperwork in place for things like that. And my husband, who is an entrepreneur, my father-in-law started a company in the 60s. And so my husband had never been in any other company other than working in an entrepreneur family-owned business, which I became a part of when I got married. I said, "What should we do?" He goes, "Well, there's no jobs. So you already own this. You've bought Barry out. Go figure it out." And I was really fortunate because we had customers who believed in the work that we were doing. And so some of those stuck by us. I was able to, and had a lot of good referrals. Some of our customers did not make it, but I have to tell you, we've been around since 1999 and we have never been stiffed. Every customer has always paid us. Really?
Wow.
Yes. And some of them that went out of business and started up, later on, or went other places, brought us in. Yeah, we've been I think a lot of it has to do with how you engage with people. And I know you know this, Walter. We don't really sell, we serve. I wish I was a better salesperson. That's probably my weakest point, but I'm a really good serve person. And I believe in servant leadership, and I believe service before commerce. And I am willing to do what I have to do to help our customers be successful and understand what success means for them. And I think in turn, they have treated us and treated me extraordinarily well. And I think that is an important thing about the culture of your company. We are a growth strategy firm, but I think was it Peter Drucker who said culture eats strategy for breakfast or something like that? I can't remember who exactly said that.
I think it was Drucker, and I think it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh, maybe so. And so I want to say that we have focused on culture, a culture that believes in service and being responsive to our customers and solving their problems. That's what we're here to do. And to have a culture of being agile and adaptable, which I think is really important, and a culture of innovation, being able to solve problems and to do experiments and to come up with ideas, whether they're for our customer or for us. So I think those are some things that are important for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot there that I'd like to come back to. The idea that sales and servants, sort of a servant mindset that we're trying to help people. I mean, I think sales is effectively helping people, right?
Yes.
And what that looks like is different in the scenario. Amazon helps people to a large, but it's all transactional, right?
Yes.
It's not people. But with what you do and with what we do, for the most part, it's like, what is the challenge that customer is having, and what can I bring with my experience and skill sets to be able to help them see a path forward to solve a particular problem. And in a smaller organization, there's sometimes we get that scope creep, right? Where you're doing things like, hey, I didn't agree to do this, right? But you're doing it. And when I've done that, to speak to your idea of being a servant of service, it always works out.
Always.
For me, right? If I give more than what I'm that's on paper, right? More than I'm getting paid for technically, I get back way more later, right? And I'm not talking about decades. I'm talking about, months, maybe a year later, somebody calls up or they give you something, or there's another piece of business, or mostly introductions and referrals. And to me, we're being rewarded for doing the right thing. And I think I grew up in the Midwest too, right? Doing all the cutting the grass and the snow shoveling and all that. You didn't have a trust fund.
Right.
But that, I think that comes from that mindset of when we were growing up, you worked hard, you got paid, you got things, you could do things, nothing was given to you. And getting people to appreciate, because we take risks, right? As entrepreneurs, and all the people listening, they're taking risk every day. They're employing people, or even if it's a, solopreneur, they're taking risk. And if we do the right thing, especially when nobody's watching, I think it always works out. And I wish more people could realize that, stop thinking transactional, especially in the sales world, because that's how we get a bad name.
I agree. And, in my world, which is all B2B, all of our customers are B2B, and they sell complex products that take a consultative sell. So I'm going to come back to something you said earlier about solving customers' problems. And I think that this is really an important point that you're making, and it's really the essence of our company, because we believe that in order to grow a company, whatever company you are, particularly though a B2B company, you have to be customer-centric. And people say, well, what other way is there to be? And I said, well, there are other ways. For example, and I'll give some examples, product-centric is not an uncommon way. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But and those companies because they're the ones who are investing a lot of money in R&D. And they're all about, creating what's next. They're creating the wave that other people are going to draft. and they're going to be out in the market first. And there's all kinds of great things for them that come with that. But they're not about being customer centric. They've got a cool idea, and if they build it, they will come is sort of their motto, and that is a model. A second way that we all know is sales centric. You just hire a bunch of really good salespeople who have, in the old days, good Rolodexes, today great LinkedIn connections, right? And they just leverage the relationships they have, and they're out there selling, and those companies because they're all about making the number. I was in sales for on and off throughout my entire career, and you get a number at the beginning of the month or the beginning of a quarter, and you're racing to that number at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and you're either a hero at the end or not. And if you can only not be a hero for so long before somebody says there's the door, because that's just the way it works in sales. So that's a sales-centric company, and you kind of know them. You know those companies, and I know you probably have worked in those companies because they sell things that the company that might not even have yet. It might be not even products that the company is making yet, or offering times and prices that don't make necessarily going to work for the company. And then, there's market-centric companies, and these are companies that are a lot like product-centric companies, but they're about drafting a ways. They're not about making it, they're about drafting it. And we're watching that happen right now with all these AI companies that have just been emerging. They won't all make it. Many of them will merge or get acquired by others. They'll have some cool ideas, but we've seen that in just about every industry. There's always that group that, latching on and trying to draft the wave, and then is customer centric. But today, I truly believe, and we've had this philosophy since we opened our doors in 1999. So we're pretty early to this thinking, but there's enough research out there. And now today, especially with AI and what's happening with the way people are doing the buying journey, you have to be customer centric because the customer is in the driver's seat. Today, the customer, search has changed a lot just in the last couple of years. And the idea that you would go online and just search and your company is going to come up is changing because the conversation is taking place on ChatGPT or Perplexity. And so that's changing the whole way we have to think about the customer buying journey, which means you have to be a lot more customer centric. I hope that was helpful to the people listening.
I think because it's a zero-click world now. If you do a Google search and you get an answer through AI, and their goal is to just keep you on that page as long as possible and show you as many ads as possible, right? So getting traffic from that is dropped off significantly. So I think from a marketing perspective, that changes a lot of things if somebody's using that particular SEO or pay-per-click, right? There's different strategies.
We all use SEO. Sooner or later, someone is going to be online doing their search one way or the other at the beginning, the middle, of the end of the process. And so people often say to me, why is marketing in your name? Because we don't really do that kind of work. We're not going to make your website. We're not going to create your email campaign. We're not going to come up with write your content, or we're not going to do any of that kind of work. And so what we really help our customers focus on is the upstream. That is, how are you going to grow your company? How will you build out customer-centric strategies? What does success look like for you? And do you understand what success is for your customers that you're serving? What's the problem they're trying to solve? And what is it they value? And what is it they value from your company, so that you can position yourself accordingly? Because that's going to be very critical, even especially to your point in our zero-click world that we are all entering into. So those are the kinds of things that you have to have clarity around. Otherwise, you just end up in a bunch of random acts, right?
And they're just like spokes on a wheel. You're just going in different directions.
Totally.
And it's not coordinated. And I have a couple of clients who, marketing and sales, we all play nice in the sandbox. We share information. There's respect, right? And it's important because if we have a marketing message that goes along this path, and we're getting that buyer ready, because the buyer's coming to us much later than they used to, right? Exactly. They used to need us, and they can get a ton of information.
They don't need us. They just need ChatGPT.
Well, think about it. We're even in the 70s. If you wanted to buy a car, you had to go talk to the person in the showroom to look at the car, to get information about the car, because it wasn't available anywhere else. Now you don't have to leave You could stay in your pajamas and buy a car with your phone, right? But that happens across multiple industries. So that buyer is coming to us later. So if we have that marketing message and that strategy put together, and it doesn't connect and isn't congruent with what the salespeople say, it becomes confusing to that buyer, and a confused buyer is never going to buy, right? So I'm kind of dragging this out, but what I wanted was your thoughts about being more transparent with our buyers. And what I mean by that is, on our website, we actually say, we address, this is hard to do. This is what you need to know. It's tough to go figure out what roof to buy. It's tough to go figure out how to do, if I should do sales training, right? Whatever your offering is, to be more transparent about what that journey looks like for that buyer, to give them more comfort moving forward, right? The less resistance. And then even being more transparent about the pricing of a complex B2B sale. We can talk about ranges and give people that level of information so that they feel like this is a good fit or it's wildly wrong, right? They can walk away. So, when you're thinking about strategy like that, is that becoming more important, less important, or am I totally crazy?
No, I think those are all important points. It's always, I think, important to be transparent with our customers. When we're talking about it at the very beginning of the process, it is really understanding your customer and having the data. So most people today have a lot of data, but they don't necessarily know how to get the insights from that data, and they're overwhelmed by looking at the data. And what we recommend is, don't try to look at the data from the perspective of, I have all this data, what's it telling me? Rather, what are the questions that you need to answer that about your customers that you can get in the data? This would be a good place maybe to share a story about my grandfather, who had a couple of passions, of which one was fishing. And I think this story will fit into this part of the conversation. So my grandfather, he had 5 grandchildren. He loved to play cards, and he loved to go fishing. And if you had the opportunity to spend a weekend with him in the summer, you almost always knew that you were going to go fishing. And so when you were about 4 or 5 years old, you got to spend the weekend with grandma and grandpa by yourself. And so you'd get dropped off on Saturday, and then our whole family would get together on Sunday for dinner. So imagine I'm 4 years old. I just got dropped off. Everyone has said hello, said goodbye, and now it's just Papa, Grandma, and me. And Papa says, of course, I know we're going to go fishing. And I this is not my first rodeo. So he says to me, what kind of fish do you want to go fishing for? And, I was one of those, I was like the middle grandchild. So I would always say something kind of odd. And so I said to Papa, blue ones, thinking I was going to stump my grandfather. And my grandfather was actually a very smart person. And he would just interpret that and say, what a good idea. We will go fishing for bluegill. Go tell grandma we're going to go fishing for bluegill. See how he did that? We're going to go fishing for bluegill tomorrow. Let's get our bait ready. And so we would get everything all ready and get up on Sunday morning, and we would head to the lake. So the very first question Papa asked me was, what kind of fish are we going to go fishing for? And you're wondering, why am I telling you the story? Because this has everything to do with customers. What kind of customers are you fishing for? Do you know what they are? What are they? Right? And where are they? He knew where the bluegill was. So we're heading out to the lake to go fishing, get out of the car. And Papa asks me the next question. What do you think the next question is?
I'm going to let you share. I'm not going to mess this up.
Where do we put our pole? Right? Where are we going to go fishing? Right? And so now this is back to sales and marketing. I mean, I'm learning sales and marketing at 4 years old, because now he said, something about we know where we're going, but now we have to look at where on the lake we're going to go. And so Papa would say, well, so what do we know about this fish? Does it like it in deep water? Does it like it in shallow water? Does it like it in sun? Does it like it in shade? Does it like it to be clear? Does it like it to be reedy? We're having a conversation about this fish. Well, my question to the folks in this community, are you having these conversations internally? Do you know your customers well enough to know what they like, what their preferences are, what kind of content they like, what kind of channels they prefer, when they prefer them, what they prefer in each one? That's really what Papa's asking me. And then he says, once we have that part of the conversation, he says, well, let's look around and see who else is fishing here. He's talking about the competition. Where are they? What kind of bait do they have? Do we want to be where there's a lot of them already? Or do we want to be somewhere else? Do we want to be where maybe there's a lot of fish, but we're going to be competing against these other people who are also got their lines in the water? Or do we want to kind of go off and hope that other fish will come our way, right, where we are, but we'll have less competition? So these are all the same kinds of questions as entrepreneurs and business owners and business leaders that we need to know about our customers. So back to your question about the data. So I'm coming back around. What is it you need to know and how you're going to get that information from your data? Because we have a lot of data, both inside and outside of our company, inside in our financial systems, in our purchasing systems, our ERP systems, our customer relationship management systems, all of our email systems, so many places that we have information. And not to mention the information we have in our external systems that tell us about LinkedIn in terms of engagement, or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or wherever other places you're posting things, YouTube. What kind of activity and engagement are you getting? Reviews that you're getting, all of that kind of data. And then, of course, you still have to think about the competition. And thinking about fishing, that metaphor of fishing, which is why we wrote my first book was Gone Fishing in 2001, trying to help people understand this concept of the fish as the customer and how to think about it from that perspective can go a long way to aligning your sales and marketing. And of course, the rest of that story is at what point is that selling and what point is that marketing? And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that adds another layer of complexity to it. But you've become grandpa or papa, as you say, because now you're asking those questions and providing that interpretation for your customers and for the audience, and having that insight, right? Because he knew what the bluegill wanted to eat. He knew what was going to work. He knew kind of where they hid out. Right. Those are all the things that you're going to help. And if you go fishing in the wrong pond, or you try to go after too many fish, right, at the same time, to me, that's the thing I see a lot of is they're not clear on who their ideal prospect is. So they go fishing across all of these ponds, and they don't really differentiate themselves. They're not able to have a coherent message.
Exactly, Walter. That's a sales-centric organization. Let's get any fish we can on the hook, right?
Yeah.
Because
and it's really hard to sustain any kind of growth because you're not really clear about who. I had a meeting with a client earlier this year, and they had just hired a new salesperson. It was her first day, and I was with the CEO and the CFO and the new salesperson, and I'm like, well, congratulations. Tell me who your customer is. And she's like, automotive. I'm like, great. Ford Motor Company, General Motors? She's like, oh, no. They have their own IT departments. They don't need us. Oh. So Bob's Tool and Die that makes little widgets for Ford? No, they're too small and they don't. Right? So, a series of questions. She had no idea who her customer was. Like, no idea. And I looked at the CEO and I'm like, this is your fault. You got to give them some direction. You got to give them the words. You got to help them, right? And they didn't have it, right? Which is the interesting piece. Yes. So, and we see that so often, especially in the small to mid-sized companies, something that a business owner does naturally and has the right conversations with the right people. They struggle to take that vision, that understanding, and give it to their team as they grow, because they can no longer, you can't scale being the only salesperson.
And this is why it's really valuable to have a positioning and messaging map, right? So once you really have clarity around who your customer is and the problem that you're solving, then you can begin to say, okay, well, what is our value proposition? How are we better and different from, right? How are we going to position in the marketplace? And then what is our messages? Because I find that otherwise you end up back with random acts of messaging. Certain salespeople are saying one thing, other salespeople are saying another. Marketing people are saying something else. Customer success people are saying something else. And so what you want to have is this message map that's very clear. Here's our claims that fulfill the promise, the value proposition that we're making. These are our claims. This is the evidence that we have to support those claims. By the way, anticipate these kinds of competitive ambushes, right? And that these kinds of customer objections, because that's what we're used to hearing. Here's what you need to do to counter that. Here's the counter to that. Here's the evidence to support that, and have that go out 3 or 4 lines, right? So now you have something to train everybody on. This is our 3 to 4, 5 key claims. This is the evidence to support them. Everyone's singing basically off of what is the same sheet of music.
Yeah,
right?
it's singing from the same hymnal as they used
Yes.
to say. So we could probably talk for a couple hours on this topic, right, and get into some of the nuances. But why don't you share like who your ideal customer is, your ideal client that you guys can serve the best? And then what's the best way for those folks? Because you've shared some ideas, right? Because you're taking that fishing scenario and carrying it through to business with all of that information that your grandfather had in his head. You're just bringing it with your experience with marketing. So who's the right people and how do they get a hold of it? What's your best choice?
So we work with business owners and leaders in about 10 million in size to up to even larger, into enterprises, mid-market and larger. So not really with startups, although I'm happy to offer answers or be available if someone has a question. I'm not going to leave someone just out there on a ledge. I will pull them off a ledge. But the thing that our customers have in common is that they are selling to other businesses who are also selling to other businesses. So there's some level of complexity there in the sale. Multiple people are buying their product. So it's not transactional in the sense that I'm just selling to one other person. My product is just...
The buyer group is kind of significant.
Yes, the buyer group is significant. They typically are longer sales cycles. So they're trying to figure out what that buying journey is. They're typically in companies that are manufacturing companies, like industrial companies or manufacturing technology companies. They can be SaaS, they can be cybersecurity, they could be AI, they can be semiconductors, computing, telecom, logistics companies. So the product is relatively complex, and the decision to buy, their customer's decision to buy, is a big deal. This is not something like, oh, I don't like it. I have buyer's remorse a little bit, but it wasn't that big a deal, and we'll just go get something else. It's not. That's not usually quite
professionally and personally. There's some skin in the game.
Yes.
With that buyers group, and
yes,
there's going to be research. There's going to be a depth of knowledge that they're going to come to the table with, and further information they're going to need to see.
And typically, those customers are facing competition. They are not alone in the marketplace. They usually already have done a pretty good job of getting customers. So they've done well enough to get some customers, but now they've kind of not sure what to do now that they're on the other side of those first set of customers. So that would be sort of attributes of the kinds of companies that typically find their way to us.
And what's the best way for the folks that are out there that are listening to this and thinking more strategically and thinking down the road? How do they get a hold of you? What's the best way?
You can email me at laurap@visionedgemarketing.com or find me on LinkedIn under Laura Patterson. I'm happy to connect with folks. We have a lot of rich content at visionedgemarketing.com, free things for people. We have a customer centricity worksheet that I put up that's free. So you can kind of see how customer centric you are right now and get a sense of where you might have some things you want to address, because you might not know. And, you can't do everything at once. At least I know most of the companies we work with cannot do everything at once. And I don't really think that most companies have to go through like a huge transformation. It's tweaking. What do we need to tweak now? What can we tweak later?
What's the priority? The priorities become the piece.
Yes. Series of tweaks. kind of like, I'm going to butcher this because I'm not really all that good at sports, but I live in Texas, and in Texas, football is a religion. So I've learned a little bit about football. And I'm from the Midwest, a baseball town. So, but we'll use a football metaphor here. How do we move the ball down the field and keep getting those first and 10s? What do we need to do to get those first and 10s, march down the field, try not to have any interceptions or fumbles, right? Don't get sacked, all those things. So we have to have good offense and good defense so we can get to those touchdowns. And how can we do that as quickly as possible? That is what we try to encourage our customers to be able to do.
So all of those links that you mentioned will be in the show notes. People can click on them. Go gather. The website does have a ton of resources in there and information for people to learn a little bit more. So I would encourage folks that are trying to take that next step to the next level and really start to sort things out and create that priority. Because if you don't have the right message and talking about that differentiator from yourself, you're going to struggle. If you're just out there, you're letting your salespeople pitch features and benefits, you're going to struggle. And what Laura's helping with is getting that on the directionally correct and getting you on the right path. So, last question, Laura: past or present, any relationship with cigars?
So, yes, back to my grandfather. My grandfather enjoyed cigars and had them. Every day. I don't know how many you smoke, Walter, a day, but he had one going all the time, 24/7. It seemed like you'd walk into my grandparents' home, it'd be like a little bit of a haze, right? So you can kind of relate. And one of the first things all of his grandchildren learned to do, so probably about 3 or 4 years old, was to fetch his cigars when he needed one. So we learned where they were, and we learned all different kinds of things about which kinds of cigars, because there are, as you know, many different kinds. And so he might have a preference for one in the morning and a different one for one in the evening. So I don't know if you have that kind of a preference. So we would learn.
There's a breakfast cigar. There's an after dinner cigar. There's an everyday cigar. Absolutely right. I think I would have enjoyed hanging out with your grandfather because he smoked in the house.
Oh yes.
I'm relegated to the outdoors, and maybe 12 years ago I built this cigar lounge in my barn, so I'm 67 steps from my back door. It's become my office, and I can smoke as much as I want out here. One thing though, he had to have some trust allowing a young child to get into his humidor and not screw things up.
Yes, but that's, I think that's part of what he was teaching: responsibility. Obviously, also he enjoyed being. My grandfather was his own piece of work, and when we would all be together. Last story about my grandfather, who I love dearly. I hope that's coming across.
Yeah, pretty clear.
We'd all be sitting around, and he would say "baby," and all heads would look up. And because he referred to all of us as baby. That way, I guess he probably didn't have to try to remember everyone's name. I don't know where that came from. He just referred to everyone as baby. And then he would love being the patriarch. And he would just say, "You baby, can you get X?" Whatever it might be that he enjoyed being brought to him. So he did enjoy being somewhat of the patriarch and being taken care of. And to add to that, my grandfather was legally blind. So just so people know, it wasn't just about being lazy. He did have trouble maneuvering. He was legally blind. And one of our favorite things was back in the day before we had audibles, the libraries put books on records. I don't know if you knew that. And he would have records delivered to the house for books. And he would listen to the book, and I would get the book from the library, and I would read the book, and he would listen to the book, and then we could talk about the book.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It was really cool. Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. You grew up baseball town, so Cincinnati?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. All right, that is pretty Midwest. All right, really enjoyed the conversation. I
too.
love the metaphors and the analogies. Grandfather was very cool. And having somebody in your life that you could enjoy, relate to, and learn from, and not realizing you're learning as a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. That's something that I think is not as prevalent as it used to be.
Our families have all kind of gotten further away from each other. When I grew up, I don't know about when you grew up, but people didn't move as far away from one another. They were like my husband's family. They all lived on the same road. Right? His grandmother lived across the street from him, and his uncles lived down the street from him. His cousin, it was just a different kind of world. We didn't all necessarily live on the same road, but we're very close to each other in terms of distance. Now you have people so spread out that the relationships are just different. You don't have a dinner every week, right?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. The world has gotten larger, and we've sort of fractured those relationships. It's a challenge. And it takes a lot of work to get there. And it still can be done, but it's a challenge. So
Yes.
again, thank you. This
My
was
pleasure.
awesome.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate it. And we might have to do this again. Thanks.
I would like that. And I hope everyone gets at least one good idea from today.
Terrific.